in Terminal A, which in part serves international flights and has been out of use for about 2 months. But airport and city officials agreed to wait until today after homeless advocates threatened to file a lawsuit if they were moved to shelters without being tested. Philadelphia City Manager Brian Abernathy said arrangements are in place to house anyone who wants to go to a shelter, adding, quote, some will not accept services at all, which is absolutely within their right, but they're certainly not allowed to stay at the airport from this point forward. The airport began enforcing new rules today, allowing only workers and those with airport business in the terminals and baggage areas. Performance arts theaters and concert halls in Delaware will be allowed to resume live shows starting June 1st. With audiences limited to 30% capacity, it's a challenge for theater companies to turn a profit. Delaware Shakespeare Company is producing. Artistic director David Stradley says it's not very economical to produce a full theater production for such a small audience.
For that company, you're gathering all those people at the same time in the same place. So it's hard to
They'll be ready to resume once all restrictions are lifted and the public feels safe to return. The afternoon's forecast, partly sunny skies, high 81 degrees. Clouding up this evening, falling back to 62 overnight. Overcast tomorrow, Wednesday's high around 80. This is WHYY.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Ooma, a cloud-based phone service for small businesses with an automated virtual receptionist and mobility features to run businesses from anywhere. More at ooma.com. And Americans for the Arts.
From NPR and WBUR, I'm Jeremy Hobson.
I'm Robin Young. It's Here and Now. Today, stocks on Wall Street soared, showing optimism about an economic boost as more states reopen businesses, even as health officials warn that reopening too quickly could lead to a second wave of COVID-19.
And if that second wave happens, we may hear about it first in states that started reopening early, like Texas and Tennessee, which ended their stay-at-home orders nearly a month ago. Let's check in with both of those states. And joining us now from Nashville is WPLN reporter Blake Farmer, and from Austin, Texas, KUT reporter Jimmy Moss. Welcome to both of you. And Blake, Nashville is now in its second phase of reopening. What do things look like right now?
Yeah, you know, Nashville, which is the state capital, has been a little slower than Tennessee as a whole. You know, like playgrounds are still closed here in town, for instance. But you now in Tennessee have gyms open, salons, restaurants have fewer restrictions on capacity. You know, even musical performances are now allowed, so long as there is this sort of 15-foot spit buffer around the performer. Some religious congregations have started meeting again, but for the most part, they're being encouraged to hold off. Lots of summer camps have decided not to try this year. The summer are giving it a whirl. And, you know, families are deciding, you know, do we take that beach trip? And a lot of them are saying, yeah, let's head down to Florida for the week.
Well, and Jimmy, in Austin, summer camps will be opening in Texas, but how is reopening unfolding there in general?
In general, we are taking it slower here, probably in the capital than the rest of the state. Really, the reopening depends on what metro area you're in and what part of the state you're in. More rural areas are finding themselves free to heed the governor's advice and reopen at a time.
even, businesses in Nashville got a bit of a scolding this morning from Nashville's public health director. He was downtown on Lower Broadway, which is the big tourist area with the honky tonks, and it's kind of been revived. And he was not seeing nearly as many masks as he'd like, and he was really coming down hard on businesses to say we need your help to sort of make this the norm.
And Jimmy, what about Boston? I would say 70%, roughly speaking, are compliant with masks. Though a few weeks ago, that number was probably higher than 80. Other major metros probably slightly more. But the rest of Texas really depends on your age and health. They're getting from mandatory, especially such as the beach tourism, had a big holiday weekend, just sort of crowded, one or two masks. Coronavirus was even a thing. Okay, let me just finally ask each of you very briefly, are you seeing a second spike?
If you look at sort of the 2-week average, there's a bit of a rise, but it's certainly nothing that public health officials are calling a spike.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Jimmy? Cases are up, but the number of hospitalizations are down, which is what the governor is using to justify these moves. That is Jimmy Moss, a reporter at KUT in Austin, Texas, and Blake Farmer at WPL in Nashville. Thanks so much to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Florida felons who have completed their prison sentences and parole terms are one step closer to regaining their right to vote after a federal court ruled against a state law that would have denied felons the right to vote until they paid off outstanding fines and court fees. In 2018, Florida voters passed an amendment to the state constitution automatically restoring the right to vote to people convicted of felonies once they completed their sentences. But last year, state lawmakers restricted that right to those who had also paid off their court-related debts. On Sunday, Judge Robert Hinkle said that amounts to a pay-to-vote system and it's unconstitutional. Desmond Meade is president of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, which backed the referendum granting voting rights to felons. Desmond, Judge Hinkle said this state law violated the 24th Amendment against poll taxes. You spent 3 years in prison after a drug charge conviction. Did you have to pay off fines and fees?
Yeah, yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I did more than just pay off my fines and fees. I even paid off the court costs. But unfortunately, many of the people who have felony convictions in the state of Florida cannot afford to pay their fines and fees. Because, when you look at it, you have people with criminal convictions, they have a hard time dealing with these collateral consequences, such as employment. And, they're not making a ton of money, and they're barely making ends meet. And so to be able to ask a person to choose between whether having their lights cut off or being evicted as opposed to paying off a fine and fee, I think that's unconscionable.
Well, we should say people convicted of murder or a felony sex offense are not covered by the judge's ruling on Sunday. They have to go through a clemency board to regain some of their rights. But to those who have been convicted of felonies and are unable to pay fees and fines they've accrued in the courts, Judge Hinkle said that those fees should not be a barrier to voting. Can you give us a sense, how much do felons typically owe the court, and how many of them are unable to pay?
It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars collectively. With the returning citizens that we've been dealing with, we've been seeing an average of around $1,500. But either way, no matter what that individual may owe in fines or restitution, this ruling basically has said that if a person is unable to pay that amount of money, that would not be a barrier to them voting. We're ecstatic about this decision, but we're also cautiously optimistic because we know, as in any type of litigation, that this could go to appeal, and it could quite very well see itself before the United States Supreme Court.
By the way, Judge Hinkle isn't contesting a state's right to disenfranchise people, take away the right to vote. He said a state may do that and may impose conditions on their reenfranchisement. Do you worry in that he is saying states have the right to take away the right to vote, that Florida will find another way?
You know, every state have that right to take away the right to vote. That has not necessarily been the problem. The problem has been restoring that right. You know, and the state of Florida at one point never did. I mean, you faced a lifetime bar from voting once convicted in Florida. Judge Hinkle's ruling, what it does is prevent the state from using any type of administrative maneuvering that would hinder or create obstacles for an individual who is trying to get the right to vote back. And the tone of that ruling basically prohibits the state from doing anything that would create any kind of barrier to vote.
What do you say to people who say, wait a minute, I'm not allowed to not pay fees I accrue? Who think this is just letting somebody off and letting the taxpayer pick up the tab?
Well, one of the things about the judge's ruling is that, and it's been very consistent with what we've been saying from day one, is that there are two types of financial obligations that are associated with a conviction. One type are the costs that are intimately connected to the offense that a person was convicted. There is an obligation there to pay that, but that obligation to pay that should not be a barrier to voting if that individual does not have the ability to pay those fines or that restitution, right? But the other cost, the court costs and these other fees that are added on, those are financial obligations that's required as a cost of doing business in court. And those are other taxes and definitely were unconstitutional.
Yeah. Desmond Meade, president of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. Desmond, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And you're listening to Here and Now.
For many college students, summer internships have become casualties of the pandemic. Even those that aren't canceled look a lot different.
It was supposed to be Cupertino, California, but no, I had to do it from my apartment.
I'm Elsa Chang, when internships go remote. This afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Ahead from 4 to 6:30 on WHYY. I'm Jack Lepiar. The world's number of coronavirus cases has now passed 348,000 deaths. Figures from Johns Hopkins University put the U.S. caseload at nearly 1.7 million, with more than 98,000 deaths. India is reporting another record increase in its number of coronavirus cases. The country's health ministry is reporting another 6,500 cases today, along with more than 4,000 deaths. It is the 7th consecutive day that India has recorded its largest jump in cases. Afghanistan's government is releasing hundreds of prisoners today as part of a peace deal between the U.S. and Taliban signed earlier this year. The release of about 900 Taliban prisoners comes at the end of a 2-year ceasefire. Taliban officials say they plan to release some government prisoners in the near future. You're listening to Here and Now. At 1:19, Here and Now continues on WHYY.
Supporting WHYY, Medico, offering a short-term care insurance plan that complements existing long-term care insurance plans with flexible coverage options. Information about options for AARP members at aarpshort-termcare.com.
Okay, I have a challenge for you. Pick one new show on WHYY and give it a listen. Like one you've never heard. Maybe a different time of day than you usually listen. A different genre. You're a newsie? Maybe try a music show. Expand your horizons. You'll be glad you did.
Facebook, Twitter, and Square are among the growing list of tech companies whose CEOs acknowledge that working from home could become the norm long after the pandemic is over. More on that story ahead this hour on Here and Now.